If you're looking to stay informed with the latest analysis on the stories that are shaping our world in the areas of foreign policy, national security, and domestic politics, consider becoming a member of the DSR Network. With the DSR Network podcasts, stay ahead of the curve on global affairs. Each episode across our more than 10 shows features top experts, policymakers, and thought leaders who break down complex issues into digestible, engaging conversations. From breaking news to historical context, we cover the latest topics that matter most. Whether it's the intricacies of international diplomacy, the latest in national security strategies, or the dynamics of U.S. politics, the DSR Network has you covered. Members receive an ad-free listening experience, bonus content for virtually all of our shows, an invitation to join the DSR Slack community, enhanced show notes for select podcasts, and much more. Visit thedsrnetwork.com/buy and enter code JULY2024 to receive 50% off the regular membership price for the first year or first month. That's thedsrnetwork.com/buy and code JULY2024. Thank you very much for your support.
This is the Daily Blast from the New Republic, produced and presented by the DSR Network. I'm your host, Greg Sargent. In recent days, Donald Trump has angrily claimed he knows nothing about Project 2025, the blueprint for an authoritarian presidency that his allies have been drawing up. But two big stories just badly undermine the claim. First, CNN reported that at least 140 people from the Trump administration have a hand in the Project 2025 plan. Second, NBC News unearthed a video showing that Trump expressly praised the plan's creators for their work in April of 2022. Today we're chatting about all this with Amanda Becker, Washington correspondent with the 19th News, an independent news organization, who has a new piece coming out next week that digs into the guts of Project 2025's plans. We're going to talk about why Trump keeps trying to run away from Project 2025 and what it means that he's so deeply entangled in it. Good to have you on, Amanda.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so Trump has really been in a rage about Democratic efforts to highlight Project 2025. In a late-night meltdown this week, he blamed it all on quote-unquote radical left Democrats. But that CNN story finds that not only are dozens of former Trump officials involved in its creation, but 6 of his cabinet secretaries also are. And some of his highest profile allies, people like immigration advisor Stephen Miller, are advising the project. So clearly the people around Trump who will actively shape a second term, if he gets one, are actively involved in creating the Project 2025 agenda, right?
Absolutely. I mean, there's such significant overlap between the people creating this blueprint and Trump's past administration and a potential future administration that it is really hard to make a legitimate case that he doesn't know about this. Also, these are people who released a blueprint ahead of his last presidency, and his administration ended up implementing a lot of these proposals that they had. So, some of this would be a return to things that Biden has undone that Trump's administration did. And it's just really hard to see the daylight between this blueprint and what a Trump administration would be.
Right. And let's go through Project 2025's big ticket items. In a second Trump administration, he'd do away with Justice Department independence and purge the professional civil service to stock all these agencies with loyalists and sycophants and cronies. That paves the way for Trump and his allies to unleash the state against designated enemies of the MAGA movement, and also to transform good information, which the government produces a lot of, into basically propaganda, boosting dear leader and his agenda and supposed accomplishments. But you have some reporting that shows that there's also a culture war dimension to Project 2025. Your piece gets at that. Can you talk about what that is?
Yeah, so the 19th core audience is women and LGBTQ people. So those are the parts of the blueprint that I really focused on. And listeners should know this is over 900 pages. So, when you compare it to the official policy blueprint from the Republican Party that they adopted earlier this week, which was 16 pages, you're getting substantially more detail in this about kind of what a future administration might look like. So I really delved into the parts that would disproportionately affect women and LGBTQ people. A lot of what they would accomplish that would, I think be an existential change for women and LGBTQ people in this country would be accomplished via the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, which they propose renaming the Department of Life. So that tells you a lot right there. They would even be, doing things like redefining, what it is to be a woman in this country and what it is to be a queer person in this country. They would stop collecting even data on certain things, so we wouldn't be able to even look into how things were affecting LGBTQ people and women. I really can't overstate kind of what a change this would be in practice if all of this comes to fruition.
I want to pick up on something you said about the Republican platform that Trump is dictating. I think by putting out this thing that's just a few sentences long, he's basically saying, people, don't look at the details, right? Don't look at that big detailed thing that lays out the horrors that we're going to unleash. Look at this little document instead.
Yeah, because you know what? The less information you put into something, people can read it as they are inclined to do based on kind of their own perspectives and potentially biases that they bring to the reading of it. But in 900 pages, there's a lot of detail in here that leaves very little up to the imagination. And so that's why I thought it was really important to go through all 900 pages with a couple of my colleagues and see what they had to say.
Okay, so on the LGBTQ and abortion rights and women's rights fronts, what would, in a nutshell, be the impact of this agenda?
So, let's start with the Department of Life. Again, we now call this the Department of Health and Human Services. In this new world, it would be the Department of Life. Right off the bat, they are asking this agency to take the official stance that families are made up of a married father and mother and children. It calls for replacing policies related to LGBTQ equity with those that support, and this is a quote, support the formation of stable married nuclear families. It states that children should be raised by their biological fathers and mothers because the male-female dyad is essential to human nature. Again, that's a quote from them, not my own words. So this is really just defining what even a family is to be, a heterosexual married couple, father, mother, biological children, and completely rejecting the variety of ways in which families are constituted in this country.
I think what you're getting at here is a big reason Trump is trying to run away from Project 2025. It's maybe politically not that easy to explain to voters that it's bad to gut the bureaucracy, though it really is. And maybe voters hear that and they say, bureaucracy, civil service, I waited on a long line. Who gives a shit? But on the culture war stuff, I think the middle of the country really senses that the MAGA movement is truly extreme. Remember, in 2022, all the big MAGA statewide candidates lost, or virtually all of them anyway, and they were all in with the anti-LGBTQ, anti-choice, anti-trans stuff, and it backfired horribly on them. And so I think what you're getting at here politically is that the Project 2025 agenda kind of puts meat on the bones of the MAGA culture warring, and that's really toxic to the middle of the country, right?
It is. And I mean, on some level, now this document has been out for a while, by the way, this 900-page document. You're hearing a lot more about it now because it's surfaced on late night television and even at the BET Awards. Celebrities are taking notice. I kind of wonder at this point whether they would rethink releasing it, given the amount of attention it's getting, because you're right. These are not policies that are supported or by the majority of voters in this country. They're not things that the average person is going to be excited about. This is, redefining kind of what it means to be an American and what rights you have and what rights you don't have and how those will be protected or not, or even tracked. I think that in this case, the more information that people get about this, kind of the less they're going to support kind of this vision, because it is very extreme. It is kind of a nod to the farthest right portion of the Republican Party that really seems to be keen to kind of remake this country into a Christian theocracy.
Right. And I want to be clear with listeners here, the culture warring stuff is more toxic potentially than those other big ticket items like, hollowing out DOJ or destroying the deep state or whatever, which is just kind of vague to people. I mean, a funny thing about Trump is that people might have trouble seeing him as a culture warrior. I mean, I've heard political professionals lament that voters don't really believe Trump is anti-choice because he's the kind of guy who would pay for abortions himself, right? He'd have affairs and pay off women to be quiet about it. I mean, we just saw that happen, right? Now, though, with the Supreme Court striking down abortion rights and these reactionary state legislatures moving forward with insanely extreme legislation, people are seeing that there's a broader agenda behind Trump. And I think what your reporting is going to show is that people will probably see this as well with Project 2025 as that gets litigated more deeply in the campaign, right?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Like, believe what you want about what Donald Trump personally believes. What really is important is what he will do as a president, right? And what the people around him will do, even if it's not him personally. The people he has in his cabinet, the people at these agencies, the people who are just even his advisors who are close to the Oval Office. That is what will impact us as American citizens living in this country. And I think in politics, it's always important to read between the lines, to be kind of skeptical of what you're hearing and not just allow yourself to make assumptions about like a best case scenario, which I think was the purpose of the very short official document from the Republican Party. But this is a document that's written by the closest people to this person when he was president the last time. They're expected to be close to him again. The Heritage Foundation, which put this out, as an incredibly influential organization in, kind of far right circles. And there's, you should have every expectation that some of this would be implemented, no matter whether Trump believes it or not. Here's the thing. He's a very skilled politician. No matter what you believe about him, I believe that to be true, whether you agree with him or not. I think he knows the politics of this are bad. So, of course, he's going to try to distance himself from this. That doesn't mean that he won't implement this and the people around him won't implement this, because they are the people who he sees as having gotten him elected the first time and who will elect him again. And so, that's how politics, for better or for worse, works in this country.
If you're loving this show, then it's clear you value unique perspectives on the issues shaping your world. That's why you should check out The Intelligence, the free award-winning daily news podcast from The Economist and its global network of correspondents. And with a subscription to Economist Podcasts Plus, you can also get access to special limited series such as The Modi Raj, a brand new show introducing you to India's enigmatic strongman, plus The Economist's suite of in-depth weekly shows on business, China, American politics, and tech, all for just a few dollars a month. Search for Economist Podcasts Plus to sign up and start listening.
What you just said about Heritage Foundation brings us to what NBC reported. They unearthed a video of Trump in 2022 speaking about the Heritage Foundation, which, again, is behind Project 2025. Here's what Trump said.
This is a great group, and they're going to lay the groundwork and detail plans for exactly what our movement will do and what your movement will do when the American people give us a colossal mandate.
So there, Trump is saying that the Heritage Foundation is going to basically create the blueprint for the MAGA movement once he's back in the White House. This shows clearly people around him want him to encourage Heritage to forge ahead with these plans. Now, to go back to what you said, I think we should remind everyone that we know from his first administration that Trump just outsources huge swaths of the policy agenda to whoever he thinks he needs to buy off at any given moment. That's why I think you're so right on when you say that what Trump says about Project 2025 is immaterial.
Yeah, I mean, look, a president can't make a decision about everything. If you look into the nitty gritty of this document, it's getting down to like very small details that no single person, including a president, could ever be personally attending to day to day. They have to delegate a substantial part of their decision making. This is agency rulemaking. It is talking about undoing rules that Biden did, that undid rules that Trump did the first time he was in office. This is something that presidents and who they surround themselves with and who they put into their top positions in cabinets and other agencies and groups are very important. They're the actual decision makers. Some of these people potentially have, close to as much power as the president themselves in terms of enacting kind of their vision or their shared vision for what they think that area of policy should be.
I think there's kind of an interesting irony here, right? Precisely because Trump is kind of a real nihilist on cultural issues. I mean, this is a guy who, he's just, you can see that he's kind of just mouthing stuff that he knows he has to say. Like on the one hand, when he talks about appointing the justices who overturned Roe v. Wade, his heart is in it when he boasts about it, but that's only because he's boasting about something he did, right? Not about what actually was accomplished, because then he turns around and kind of acts as if it's not all that important, right? But the irony here being that precisely because he just doesn't give a crap about these issues, he's more likely to outsource them to all these very serious and determined culture war extremists.
I'm glad you brought up abortion, because his Trump's line lately, right, is that he returned abortion regulation to the states, and that's what everyone wanted. That's what all Americans wanted. That's what all legal experts wanted. Now, polling, shows the opposite. But when you look at this document, it does not outsource abortion regulation to the states. So, at that Department of Life that they want to rename as such, they will be collecting data on people who have abortions. That includes the time in their pregnancy they got an abortion, the reason that they got an abortion, the state that they were in when they got that abortion. And so the federal government will be collecting information about you, even if you're in a blue state, like, say, California, that has abortion rights that aren't going anywhere. They would rescind Biden administration guidance that the EMTALA law, which mandates that emergency rooms must provide you with abortion care if you show up miscarrying or something and need that abortion to save your life or your health, that no longer applies. They would, have the Food and Drug Administration reverse its 2000 approval of mifepristone, the abortion medication drug. Well, Trump is now saying, he, has given this all back to the states and they'll be the ones deciding. But this document tells a very different story about how the federal government would be involved in regulating, restricting, and preventing and tracking people who have abortions.
Crucial stuff. To tie it all together, on the one hand, you have Project 2025 revealing not just plans to prosecute his enemies and destroy the civil service, but also their plans to use the government as a weapon for the most extreme and reactionary culture warring. But at the same time, Trump is now raging at the idea that Project 2025 speaks for him, which just draws more media attention to his plans, even as you made very clear, it's painfully obvious that the people who will shape a second Trump term absolutely do see it as a blueprint. So in a sense, his kind of scamming around this is sort of blowing up in his face. I mean, I don't know if that will be enough to beat him, but it's certainly, by his own actions, a very serious political liability, or so it's becoming, right? It's interesting how it's really becoming a cultural phenomenon, the debate over this.
I mean, as a policy person, I love to see something like this kind of break into the public consciousness, because so much of what we talk about in domestic politics and U.S. politics is kind of the political side of it, and like the maneuvering and the ego and the personality. This is truly a policy blueprint for what kind of a small faction of people in this country on the far right would like to see our country become. And I think it's fantastic that people are paying attention to this, because if we're not paying attention, this could be the country we become. And I don't think it's a country that polling would show that pretty much 70% at least of the country wants on some level, depending on kind of the section that you're looking at right here. And so, this has burst into the public consciousness in a way that I don't think probably even the authors of this report anticipated. I mean, just this week in Washington, there's been multiple briefings by groups that were 2-3 hours long about Project 2025, like trying to get the word out there. Now, obviously, these are Democratic and kind of liberal-leaning groups holding these briefings. Because I think that people on the right or the Republican Party would be very happy to kind of stop talking about this and to get this off of the airwaves. Because you're right, he's trying to distance himself from this, but kind of it's too intertwined, I think, for the average person who's looking at this and looking at these connections to fully buy that this is completely removed from what a second Trump administration would be.
Really well said. I mean, his scamming around this is just so sleazy, but it's just really backfiring. Like I said, I don't know if it's going to be enough. And as you say, a lot depends on whether people are paying attention, which I fear they are not. But anyway, Amanda Becker, thank you so much for coming on with us today. Terrific discussion. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Everybody, make sure to check out some new content we have up at TNR.com. Grace Seegers explaining how the 2024 election will reshape the Supreme Court, just as the 2016 election did. And Walter Shapiro asking a pointed question. What will Biden's enablers right now say if he loses the election? We'll see you next week. You've been listening to The Daily Blast with me, your host, Greg Sargent. The Daily Blast is a New Republic podcast and is produced by Riley Fessler on the DSR Network.